AITA for throwing out my college roommate when I learned his secret? Hey Reddit, I don't really know where else to post this, but I've been lurking here for a while, and I figured this was the best place to put my thoughts. Plus, I feel like writing it out might help me process what's happening, or at least make me feel less like I'm losing my mind. So here's the deal. I think there's something wrong with my college roommate. And I don't mean he's weird wrong. I mean wrong. Let me back up a bit. I'm a 19-year-old sophomore in college. Last year I lived at home and commuted because I thought it would save money, and honestly, I was nervous about living on campus. I wasn't ready for the whole dorm life thing, sharing a room with a stranger, constantly being surrounded by people, dealing with all the noise. It just seemed like a lot. But after a year of hour-long bus rides, missing out on every late-night hangout because I had to get home, and feeling like an outsider every time I walked into a dorm event as that commuter kid, I decided that this year I'd do it. I was ready for the real college experience. When I applied for housing, I didn't request a specific roommate. I figured the random assignment system would be fine, and it honestly felt like part of the adventure. New year, new me, new start, right? My roommate's name popped up in my email over the summer, Alex. 19, same age as me. No social media that I could find, which I chalked up to him being either super private or just not into that kind of thing. Not a big deal. Move-in day came, and I was so excited. My parents helped me drag my suitcases up to the 3rd floor of a dorm that smelled like a mix of industrial cleaning supplies and old carpet. I was buzzing with nerves, like this was the start of a whole new chapter. When I got to the room, Alex was already there. He was sitting cross-legged on the bare mattress, a duffel bag on the floor beside him, unpacking a small stack of books. I remember thinking he looked normal, like aggressively normal. Average height, kind of lanky, dark hair that looked like he cut it himself, a plain gray t-shirt. He didn't seem nervous or overly excited like most people moving in. If anything, he seemed calm. Too calm. We exchanged the usual awkward hi and nice to meet you small talk. He wasn't rude or anything, just quiet. Polite, soft-spoken, and a little shy. Honestly, I was relieved. I'd been bracing myself for a loud, messy roommate who'd throw parties or blast music at 3 a.m., but Alex seemed like the total opposite. The first week went smoothly. Alex kept his side of the room immaculate. He didn't have much stuff, just some clothes, a laptop, a couple of notebooks, and those books I saw him unpacking. He didn't decorate his side of the room at all. No posters, no pictures, no plants, nothing. It looked like a hotel room someone had just checked into. I figured he was just a minimalist or maybe wasn't into that kind of thing. We weren't instant best friends or anything, but we got along fine. We'd chat a little before bed or say good morning, but that was it. He was respectful of my space, and I was respectful of his. It was kind of the ideal roommate situation. Except, there was one small thing. Alex never talked about his schedule. You know how college is, everyone is constantly talking about their classes, their professors, their majors, their assignments. But whenever I asked Alex something like, hey, what classes are you taking, or do you have class early tomorrow, he'd give these vague, mumbled answers. Oh, I'm doing a lot of independent study this semester. Or, mostly online stuff. It's easier that way. It wasn't like he was defensive or anything, he just never gave me details. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. I'm a psychology major. People are complicated, and not everyone likes to share. Maybe he had social anxiety. Maybe he was embarrassed about his major. Maybe he was behind on credits. It wasn't really my business, so I dropped it. About 3 weeks into the semester, things started to feel off. It was a Thursday night, and I'd been at the library late, cramming for a quiz. I got back to the dorm around midnight, exhausted, expecting to find Alex asleep like usual. Instead, I walked into a pitch-black room. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone out or was in the bathroom. But then I noticed a faint glow in the corner, like light reflecting off someone's glasses. Alex was sitting on his bed, perfectly still, just staring at something in his hands. It took me a second to realize it was a piece of paper. He was sitting completely in the dark, holding it close to his face like he was trying to memorize whatever was on it. Hey, I said, flipping the light switch. He blinked at me, startled, and quickly shoved the paper under his pillow. Then he gave me this awkward smile, like he'd been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to. Sorry, he said softly. I was just thinking. That's all he said. No explanation, no follow-up. I stood there for a second, debating whether to press him about it, but something about the way he looked at me made me drop it. I just mumbled, okay, and went to brush my teeth. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop picturing him sitting there in the dark, staring at that paper. After that night, I started paying more attention to Alex. I realized he never seemed to leave our room. I'm serious. I'd go to class in the morning, come back in the afternoon, and he'd be sitting at his desk. I'd go study at the library for hours, come back late, and he'd still be there, either on his laptop or just sitting. I never saw him in the dining hall. Never saw him walking across campus. Never saw him carrying a backpack. It was like he existed only in our room. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he was a hermit, or maybe he ordered delivery all the time. Some people just don't like socializing. But the longer it went on, the stranger it felt. His routine was unnatural. He'd sit at his desk for hours at a time, completely still, not even fidgeting. Sometimes he'd just stare at his laptop screen without typing anything. Other times, he'd read one of his books, but I never saw him flip pages. It was like he was stuck on a single page for hours. I started keeping track of his habits, just out of curiosity. He woke up at exactly 6 a.m. every day. No alarm. He ate something at exactly 12 p.m. and 7 p.m., always at his desk. I never saw him go get food. He showered every other night at 9:30 p.m. Always exactly 9:30. He never talked on the phone, never FaceTimed anyone, never had friends over. The more I watched him, the more it felt like he wasn't real. Like he was running on a script. About a month into the semester, I finally got a glimpse of that paper he was always staring at. It was late again, and I came back from a group project meeting. The door was cracked open, and I peeked in before stepping inside. Alex was sitting cross-legged on his bed, completely focused on that piece of paper. He didn't notice me at first. I tried to be quiet as I stepped in, but the door creaked. He jerked his head up, startled, and shoved the paper under his pillow again. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. He gave me that same awkward smile. No problem. But as he moved, the edge of the paper slipped out from under the pillow, just enough for me to see a corner of it. It wasn't notebook paper. It looked like thick, yellowed parchment, like something you'd see in an old library archive. There was something written on it in small, neat handwriting. I couldn't make out the words, but it didn't look like English. When he noticed me glancing at it, he quickly shoved it back under the pillow. Something about his expression made my stomach twist. It wasn't embarrassment. It was fear. That was when I realized this wasn't just a socially awkward guy. Something about Alex didn't make sense. And I was starting to get scared. It started subtle. 2 weeks after the whole paper under the pillow incident, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like this low-level anxiety followed me around the dorm, humming in the back of my mind. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Sophomore year is hard. I was balancing psych classes, a part-time job, and trying to keep up a social life. Of course I was stressed, but this wasn't normal stress. I'd come back from class and feel like the air in our tiny dorm room was heavy, like someone had been standing right where I was a second ago. My textbooks and notebooks wouldn't be in the same place I'd left them. I'm not a messy person, and I'm meticulous about my study space, so it didn't make sense. I'd leave a pen perfectly parallel to the edge of my desk, come back from lunch, and it would be gone, or worse, just slightly moved, like someone had picked it up, examined it, and set it back down. At night, I'd wake up feeling like eyes were on me. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with that cold, prickly sensation crawling up your spine, like you're being hunted? That's what it felt like. I'd lie perfectly still, clutching my blanket, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Every time I worked up the courage to glance at Alex's bed, he'd be asleep, or at least, he'd look asleep. It wasn't proof, but my gut screamed something was off. Then came the chair incident. I'd stayed up late working on an essay, too tired to crawl into bed, so I just left my laptop on my desk and passed out around 1 a.m. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was that my desk chair was facing my bed. That might sound like nothing, but I never leave my chair like that. I always tuck it neatly under my desk before bed, partly because our dorm room is small and I hate tripping over it at night. But now it was turned toward me, like someone had been sitting there, watching me sleep. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to tell myself I must have been tired and turned it without realizing, but deep down I knew I hadn't. A few days later, I woke up around 3 a.m., groggy and disoriented. At first, I thought maybe I'd just had a nightmare, but then I realized why I'd woken up. Alex was standing next to my bed. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I thought he'd hear it. He was completely still, his face expressionless, just watching me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just lay there, pretending to be asleep, praying he'd go back to bed. After what felt like an eternity, he finally turned and climbed into his own bed without saying a word. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I told myself I couldn't live like this anymore. I marched straight to the RA's office, hands shaking, and told her everything. The paper, the staring, the moved stuff, the chair, him standing over me while I slept. She listened with a sympathetic but detached smile and nodded like she'd heard it all before. Some freshmen just take a while to adjust socially, she said gently. Maybe he doesn't know how to interact with people yet. I reminded her he wasn't a freshman, he was a sophomore, like me. That made her pause, but only for a second. Still, she said, he doesn't sound dangerous. Just awkward. Maybe try talking to him about boundaries. That was it. That was her solution. I walked out of her office feeling even worse than before. If no one was going to take me seriously, I'd have to handle this myself. I wasn't sleeping well, and every night felt like torture. So I decided to do something that would either prove I was paranoid or confirm my worst fears. I downloaded a motion-activated camera app on my laptop. It's one of those cheap apps meant for catching a roommate stealing snacks or a sibling snooping through your stuff. I set my laptop on the dresser across the room, angled it so it captured both of our beds, and left it recording overnight. I didn't tell Alex, obviously. That first night, I barely slept. I just lay in bed, wide awake, waiting for morning so I could check the footage. When the sun came up, I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding. I opened the footage and hit play. At first, everything was normal. The room was dark and I could hear the soft sound of both of us breathing. I fast-forwarded through the first few hours. Nothing. And then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., Alex moved. He sat up in bed slowly, like he didn't want to wake me. Then he swung his legs over the side and stood up. He just stood there for a minute, staring into the dark. Then he started pacing. Back and forth, slow and deliberate. His movements were almost mechanical, like he was following some internal rhythm. After a few minutes of pacing, he stopped and turned toward me. I felt sick watching it. He walked over to my bed and stood there, completely still, just staring down at me. For 5 full minutes. I wanted to vomit. Then he took something out of his pocket, a small notebook, and started writing. He scribbled something quickly, glancing at me every few seconds, then slipped the notebook back into his pocket and silently returned to bed. The footage ended there. I sat frozen at my desk, my stomach in knots. This wasn't me being paranoid. This wasn't social awkwardness. This was terrifying. I didn't go to class that day. I couldn't focus. I called my best friend, who lives in another dorm building, and told her everything while trying not to cry. She was horrified. "Okay, this is not normal," she said firmly. "You need to confront him. Right now. And I'll stay on the phone while you do it." The thought of confronting Alex made my skin crawl, but I couldn't keep living like this. I had proof now. I waited until I heard him get back from the shower right on time, 9:30 p.m. He was sitting at his desk, typing something on his laptop, completely calm. I took a deep breath. Alex, I said, my voice shaking. He turned toward me, expression blank. Yeah, we need to talk. The moment I opened my mouth, my heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. I'd rehearsed this 100 times in my head, but when Alex looked up at me with those calm, dark eyes, every word I'd planned felt like it might get caught in my throat. Still, I had to say it. Alex, what the hell is going on? He froze. For a long, uncomfortable moment, he just sat there, staring at me like I'd asked him a question in a language he didn't understand. His hands twitched slightly, and I noticed he was gripping something under the desk. Finally, he blinked and said softly, "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. You know what I mean. The pacing, the staring, the camera footage. You've been standing over me while I sleep, Alex. His face drained of color, and his mouth opened like he wanted to explain, but nothing came out. He looked terrified, like a deer caught in headlights. Then he started whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He repeated it over and over, his voice trembling, each word faster than the last. "Alex," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Stop. Tell me why." He swallowed hard, glancing down at his desk. I'm just trying to make sure everything's okay." I felt my stomach twist. Everything's okay? What does that even mean? He didn't answer. That's when I noticed the small black notebook on his desk. "Give me that," I said, pointing to it. He froze again, his hand sliding over the notebook like he was guarding it with his life. "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "No, you can't." I took a step closer. "Alex, give it to me." He clutched it tighter, his knuckles white. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think." I hissed. "I literally have video of you watching me sleep. Give me the notebook." He shook his head, trembling now. My heart was pounding, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "If you don't give it to me, I swear I'll call campus security. Right now." Something in my tone must have gotten through to him, because after a long pause, he slowly reached for the notebook and handed it to me with shaking hands. The second it touched my fingers, I felt this weird heaviness in my chest, like I was holding something radioactive. I opened it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The first page was a detailed pencil sketch of me, lying in bed. The shading was beautiful, like something you'd see in an art portfolio, but the subject matter made my stomach churn. I flipped the page. Another drawing of me, this time from a different angle. Another night. Page after page, there I was. Me brushing my teeth. Me reading at my desk. Me napping. All of them hyper-detailed, like he'd spent hours studying me. Then I saw the notes. They weren't paragraphs, just short, precise bullet points, written in small, meticulous handwriting. 6:45 a.m. She woke up. Made tea. Didn't finish it. 9:12 a.m. She left for class. Backpack, blue. Shoes, white sneakers. 12 p.m. Returned to room. Ate granola bar. Looked tired. 4:37 p.m. Phone call with Sophie. Sounded upset. I felt my stomach turn. Every day, every interaction, every word I said in the room, all of it recorded in eerie detail. I flipped faster. Weeks of my life laid out like an instruction manual. Then I found the more recent pages. 3:07 a.m. She stirred but didn't wake up. 3:20 a.m. She breathed faster for a while. 3:40 a.m. Stayed still, probably dreaming. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the notebook. "Alex," I whispered, my voice cracking. "What the hell is this?" He flinched like I'd hit him. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, his voice shaking. You don't understand. I'm not trying to hurt you." I stared at him, tears stinging my eyes. "This is insane. You're stalking me. You're literally taking notes on my every move." I just want to make sure you're okay," he mumbled again, his voice soft but frantic. "I have to. Have to?" My voice rose, shaking with anger. "What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. I slammed the notebook shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. "Get out," I snapped. "Get out right now. I'm calling the police." That's when his face changed. Up until that moment, he just looked scared and awkward. But now he looked desperate. "No," he said suddenly, shaking his head. "Please, you don't understand. I'm not here for college." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" "I'm here for you." I froze. The room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing, shallow and fast. "What do you mean, you're here for me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, eyes wide and shining with something I couldn't place. "Fear? Obsession? Something darker?" "I can't explain," he said quickly. "You wouldn't believe me. But you're not safe. You never were. I'm trying to protect you." My entire body went cold. "Protect me?" I repeated. "From what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up suddenly, moving so fast I stumbled back toward the door. "Alex," I said, trying to sound steady even though my whole body was trembling. "You need to leave." But he didn't move toward the door. He moved closer to me. "I'm not your enemy," he said softly, his voice calm now, eerily calm. "I'm the only one keeping you safe." At that moment, I realized I wasn't just afraid of Alex. I was afraid of whatever he thought he was protecting me from. My fingers were trembling so hard I could barely type out 9/11. My vision tunneled, I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't even hear my own heartbeat over the roaring panic in my ears. "Please," Alex whispered, his voice low and urgent. "Please don't call them. You don't understand." That made me move faster. The phone rang. My voice cracked as I choked out, "Hi, yes, he's in my room. Please, I need." Alex stepped forward, tears brimming in his eyes, hands raised like he was trying to calm a cornered animal. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice trembling. "I'd never hurt you. Just, please don't." I stumbled back until my shoulder hit the door, clutching the phone like a lifeline. I could barely get the words out to the operator. "He's in my dorm, my roommate. He's been watching me." I'm scared. Then everything happened at once. There was a pounding on the door, so loud I jumped. "Campus security. Open up." Before I could move, the door burst open. My RA, red-faced and wide-eyed, stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Step away from her," one of them barked. Alex froze like a deer in headlights. His hands shot up higher, shaking. "I didn't." "I wasn't," he stammered, but the officers moved fast. One grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back, while the other swept the room with sharp, practiced movements. I pressed myself against the wall, tears streaming down my face, unable to form words. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one officer asked me, but I couldn't speak. I just nodded shakily, my eyes glued to Alex as they cuffed him. He didn't fight, didn't resist. He just looked at me with this strange mixture of sadness and relief. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so softly I barely heard him. "I'm so sorry." Everything after that was a blur. They led Alex out of the room, and I remember sinking onto my bed, shaking so hard I thought I might throw up. The RA kept asking if I needed water, if I wanted her to call a friend, but all I could do was sit there, staring at the open door where Alex had just been. It didn't feel real. Campus police stayed behind, asking questions when I'd first noticed something was wrong, how long he'd been my roommate, whether I'd seen him with weapons or drugs. I kept saying no. He didn't have weapons. He didn't yell or threaten me. He didn't do anything except watch. That seemed to unsettle the officers more than if I'd said he'd been violent. They ran his ID. It took less than an hour for everything to come out. Alex wasn't a student. Not only was he not enrolled, but he'd never even applied. The student ID he'd used to get into housing was a fake, printed so well that it passed every check the university system had in place. For months, this guy had been living in a dorm he didn't belong in, eating God knows where, sneaking around campus undetected. I was shaking as one of the officers broke the news. "We can't find him in any school records," he said. "He's not a student here." My stomach dropped. "Then, who is he?" The officer hesitated, then exchanged a glance with his partner. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. "His real name is Alexander, redacted." "Does that mean anything to you?" I shook my head. No. The officer cleared his throat. He says he's your half-brother. I laughed. Out loud. It was this sharp, humorless sound that made the RA flinch. My what? Half-brother, the officer repeated. He says your mother had him when she was really young, and against my better judgment, I agreed. They brought me into this tiny, sterile office, and there he was, sitting in a chair, hands cuffed, looking small. When he saw me, his face lit up with this heartbreaking mixture of joy and sorrow. I told them, he said softly. I told them you're my sister. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you say something? His eyes filled with tears. Because you'd hate me. I don't hate you, I whispered, even though I was terrified. You scared me, Alex. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to be close to you. I wanted to protect you. From what? I asked, my voice breaking. He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, they'll never tell you the truth. But I will. They're holding him now. I don't know if he'll face charges, or if they'll send him somewhere for psychiatric evaluation. I just know I haven't slept in days. Campus security gave me a temporary single dorm. My mom cried when I called her. She admitted everything. She'd had him when she was 16. He was adopted by a family she never heard from again. I asked her why. She never told me. She just sobbed and said, I didn't want you to feel unsafe. The irony of that almost made me laugh. Now I'm stuck replaying every second of the last few weeks in my head, trying to make sense of it. The pacing, the sketches, the pages of notes. And the worst part? That last thing he said to me, before they led him out of the room. He leaned forward and whispered, they're watching you too, you know. I don't know who they are. But now, every time I walk across campus, I feel those same eyes on me. Campus housing moved me into a different dorm building. A single room. No roommate. I thought that would make me feel better, but it hasn't. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face calm, quiet, watching me from the shadows of my old dorm. I wake up at 3 a.m. almost every night now, heart pounding, convinced I'll open my eyes and see him standing there again. I can't study in silence anymore. I keep my TV on low or play white noise constantly, just so I don't have to hear my own thoughts. I've stopped walking alone at night. I double-check every lock. I feel like I'll never relax again. And yet, I can't stop thinking about him. After they arrested him, I called my mom, sobbing so hard I couldn't get the words out. She started crying too, and then she told me the truth. She had Alex when she was 16. She was terrified and overwhelmed, so she placed him for adoption. She thought she'd never see him again. She thought she was giving him a better life. When she found out she was pregnant with me years later, she wanted a fresh start. She didn't tell me about him because she didn't want me to feel unsafe, or like there was this dark family secret. She didn't even know he'd been searching for us. When the police called her, she completely broke down. She said, please don't hate him. He's sick. He thought he was protecting you. I didn't know what to say. I keep going over the notebook in my head. The sketches. The notes. It was terrifying, yes. Violating. But it wasn't violent. He never touched me, never threatened me. He watched. He observed. He believed, truly believed, he was protecting me. From what? I still don't know. I don't know if they are real, or if that was just a delusion he clung to. But now I'm left with this crushing guilt. Because while I'm trying to move on, Alex is sitting in a cell. My mom is devastated, sobbing over the phone and begging me to drop the charges. And my friends. God, my friends. They keep telling me I'm heartless. That I should understand he's mentally ill. That I should forgive him because he's family. But every time I picture him standing over my bed at 3 a.m., silent and still, I feel sick. I don't want him in my life. I don't want to see him again. I don't care that we share blood. And that makes me feel like a monster. So I guess this is my final post, Reddit. AITA for pressing charges against my half-brother and refusing to forgive him? Because right now, I feel like I'll never sleep soundly again. And that's it. That's the end of my story. But every time I walk down the hall of my dorm at night, I can't shake this feeling. Alex might not be here anymore. But maybe he was right. Maybe someone else is watching me now.